He told me I was too fragile to run a business, that I'd get overwhelmed handling numbers, contracts, people, that I belonged in the background, a helper, not a leader. So while he was busy giving advice I never asked for, I bought out his biggest competitor. Quietly. Entirely. And when the news hit the industry, he didn't just lose a rival. He lost his reputation, to the woman he underestimated most. You ever get told you're too fragile to handle something, not because you said so, but because someone else decided it for you? That's what my son-in-law Kyle said to me. Word for word. You're too fragile to deal with contracts and vendors, Margaret. It's not your thing. And I just smiled and nodded. But what I didn't say out loud in that moment was, I built a business once. Before you were even born. I just didn't talk about it. Didn't have to. Because I walked away from that chapter for love. For family. For my daughter. But now? I've got time. I've got silence. I've got money. And I've got rage that's been aging like fine wine. Let me start at the beginning. Kyle married my daughter Rachel, about 10 years ago. I never liked him. There was always something too slick about him. Too perfect on the outside, good smile, expensive suits, always talking like he was the smartest man in the room. But underneath? You scratch that charm for 2 seconds and he gets defensive. Cold. Arrogant. He opened a business 5 years ago, a consulting firm, though I never really understood what he actually did. Something about logistics and supply chain management for retailers. What I did know was, he talked big, took big risks, and treated his team like replaceable parts. Rachel helped him build it from scratch. She handled everything behind the scenes, payroll, hiring, even some contracts. But Kyle was the face. The one who went to industry dinners, shook hands, made deals, played golf. Rachel would vent to me sometimes, quietly, carefully, like she wasn't allowed to be too loud about her own discomfort. Mom, she once said, he just doesn't listen. It's always his way or no way. That was over a year ago. And then things changed. Last fall, Rachel got sick. Not the flu. Not something quick. Something terrifying. Breast cancer. Stage 2. Diagnosed in October. I moved in to help. Of course I did. I left my quiet little condo and took the guest room. I cooked meals, drove her to appointments, picked up her meds, and tried to bring light where the shadows kept creeping in. You'd think Kyle would step up. He didn't. He pulled away. Oh, he posted supportive pictures online. Said all the right things in public. But inside the house? He buried himself in work. He stopped taking dinners with us. Started sleeping in the downstairs office. He acted like his own wife's illness was a scheduling inconvenience. I kept my mouth shut, for Rachel. But I took notes. Mental ones. Like I always do. One night, while Rachel was asleep and Kyle was pacing in the kitchen on a loud phone call, I overheard him. No, I can't do it alone. She used to handle all the payroll crap. Now I'm stuck with it. Honestly, if her mom wasn't here, I'd hire someone to feed her soup. He laughed. Laughed. I sat in the hallway and clenched my fists until my nails pressed half moons into my palms. That was my daughter. My only child. Fighting for her life. And that man was treating her like a liability. I started noticing more. He stopped paying some of the bills. He left dishes for me to wash. He made jokes about how the old lady was turning the house into a senior center. He even said to my face, Margaret, maybe ease off the cooking. You're not as quick as you used to be. But the final straw? It came the week Rachel had her first chemo round. She was exhausted. Her body was weak. Her spirits even weaker. She asked Kyle for help with a contract that came in for the business, something she used to handle. He waved her off and said, I'll take care of it. You rest. I can't have you messing things up while you're drugged up on meds. And I watched my daughter's face fall. Like she'd been told she didn't matter. That night, I made tea. Sat with her. Rubbed her feet. And while she drifted off to sleep, I whispered, I see everything. And I won't forget. A few weeks later, I was making breakfast when Kyle strolled into the kitchen and asked me what I used to do before I retired. Real estate? Admin work? He guessed. I replied quietly, I used to own a logistics consulting business. He laughed like I told a joke. You? Seriously? That stuff's brutal. You've got to be aggressive, sharp. That's not really your energy, Margaret. You're more nurturing. I just smiled. And that was the moment I decided I was going to destroy him. Not out of pettiness. Not even out of revenge. But because my daughter deserved better. And because I had something he didn't. Memory. Experience. And time. I started small. I used Rachel's laptop in the evenings. I looked up Kyle's competitors. Found out who hated him, who he tried to undercut, and which companies were just barely behind him in contracts. There was one, Benton Strategies. A mid-sized firm with a strong core team, loyal clients, and a recent financial setback after an internal shakeup. Their CEO had just stepped down due to illness. The company was profitable, but struggling with transition. I knew the business model. I'd run one just like it in the 80s. I knew what they needed. And I knew how to offer it. Quietly. I reached out. Not as Margaret the mom-in-law. I used my old contacts, the ones I hadn't spoken to in years. Turns out, people remember when you treated them well. Turns out, people love underdog stories. Turns out, I still had sharp instincts. Kyle never knew I was in touch with his competition. Never knew I was building something right beneath his nose while he mocked my meatloaf. I drained one of my savings accounts. Sold a piece of land I hadn't touched in 20 years. And I made an offer to Benton's board. I didn't buy in. I bought them out. Clean. Legal. Quiet. When the papers were signed, I walked out of the lawyer's office with a new title, chairwoman. And the best part? I didn't say a word. Not yet. I still wore my teal cardigan. Still served soup. Still helped Rachel with her meds. Still stayed silent when Kyle tossed around words like fragile, soft, and old-fashioned. But every time he mocked me, I wrote another note in my ledger. Because I had the ultimate reveal waiting. And when I tell you how it happened, you'll understand why his arrogance became the weapon I used to break him. Kyle had no clue what was coming. He strutted around the house like he was the CEO of the world, too self-absorbed to notice how quiet I'd gotten. But silence from a woman like me doesn't mean surrender. It means calculation. Rachel, bless her heart, was healing. Her body was weak, but her spirit? Unbreakable. I helped her walk laps around the garden, wrapped her in blankets when the chills hit, and smiled through it all. I didn't tell her what I was doing behind the scenes, not yet. Not until it was real. Because when I say I bought Benton Strategies, I mean I didn't just buy a slice. I bought control. I owned 68% of the company by the time the papers were finalized. And I'd hired a former colleague, a fierce woman named Dora who used to run procurement for a massive tech chain, to be my CEO while I operated quietly as chair. I didn't want to sit in an office. I wanted to steer the ship from the shadows. Let Kyle keep thinking I was just a doting old mother-in-law baking cornbread. Meanwhile, Dora and I got to work. We ran a full audit of Benton's operations. Streamlined their messy accounts, automated systems Kyle still managed manually, and pulled in new talent. I poached a few brilliant analysts, folks Kyle had rejected in the past for being overqualified or not a culture fit. That was his code for too independent. And guess what? Those same analysts turned Benton's bottom line around in 60 days. We began bidding on the same contracts Kyle's company chased. Not all at once, no. Too obvious. But slowly. Strategically. I started circling his big clients. Not the little ones. The whales. The ones that made his business run. Dora knew how to play the long game. And I funded her like a war chest. Meanwhile, at home, Kyle started getting nervous. I could tell by the way he stopped bragging at dinner. He was taking more calls in the garage. Swearing under his breath. Rachel would ask him what was wrong, and he'd mutter something about stupid undercutting competitors and backdoor pricing strategies. I almost laughed into my coffee. He didn't know that competitor was me. Oh, the irony. The man who told me I was too fragile was being quietly gutted by a woman he thought was too old to matter. Then came the first public shift. One of Kyle's longtime clients, a chain of regional furniture stores, ended their contract with him. Publicly. They released a press statement praising Benton's new leadership and direction. The buzz started rolling. Kyle came home that night like a thundercloud. He slammed a drawer in the kitchen and snapped at Rachel for leaving a dish towel on the floor. She went upstairs quietly. I followed. As I tucked a blanket around her, she said softly, "Mom, I think something's happening with his business. He won't say it, but I can tell." I kissed her forehead and replied, "Don't worry, honey. Sometimes the right things fall apart so better things can rise." She blinked at me like she didn't quite understand. Not yet. But she would. 2 weeks later, Kyle tried to poach one of Benton's newly acquired clients. Sent them an aggressive offer, promising better rates, personal attention, all the bells and whistles. They forwarded the email to us. And included a note. "We're happy where we are. Please let your chairwoman know she made the right choice." I printed that email and folded it into my purse. I kept it like a souvenir. One afternoon, while Kyle was out, I walked into his home office. The door wasn't locked. The screen was open. He'd left a spreadsheet up. Red numbers. Client drop-offs. Lost revenue. And a panic email thread to his COO. "Find out how they're getting this info. We're bleeding. I don't know who Benton's backed by, but they're killing us." I stood there and let the satisfaction rise like warm steam in my chest. This wasn't about money. Not for me. It was about showing the man who dismissed me, who ignored my daughter, that I was never fragile. I was simply quiet. And quiet doesn't mean weak. The breaking point came in the 3rd month. Benton won a multi-million-dollar contract with a national department store chain. One Kyle had been chasing for 2 years. He'd flown out to meet them, sent them wine baskets, schmoozed their executives. And in one morning, they chose Benton instead. He came home that night and drank 3 glasses of scotch before 6 p.m. Then he turned to me and said, "I don't know what the hell is going on. Someone's sabotaging us." I stirred the soup on the stove and said gently, "Oh honey, maybe you're just not handling the pressure well." He glared at me. "This isn't funny, Margaret. This isn't some senior bingo game. This is business. Real business. You wouldn't get it." I turned to face him, holding the ladle like a gavel. "I built a business before you even knew how to spell revenue. I was managing warehouses while you were still figuring out how to ride a bike." His jaw dropped. He blinked. "What?" I just smiled. "Soup's ready." The next morning, Benton's leadership was profiled in a major industry newsletter. The piece was titled, "Meet the Woman Behind Benton's Quiet Revolution." It didn't name me outright, just a retired logistics executive with decades of experience and a sharp eye for forgotten potential. But the quotes? They were mine. The tone? Unmistakably mine. Kyle read the article at the kitchen table. I watched the color drain from his face. He looked at me slowly and said, "You wouldn't happen to know anything about this, would you?" I raised my mug of coffee and said, "You really should give women more credit, Kyle. We notice things. We remember things. And sometimes, we own things." That day, I finally told Rachel everything. We sat on the patio while the sun slipped low over the horizon. She wore her soft blue shawl and a little smile that hadn't appeared in months. "When I told her I bought Benton," she gasped. "When I told her I was the one taking Kyle's clients," she laughed. "When I told her I'd done it all without saying a word, just strategy, timing, and a team that believed in me," she cried. "I wish I'd seen this side of you sooner," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "It's always been there. I just never needed to unleash it before." And now? Now I was just getting started. The next few weeks were like watching a crumbling statue, slow cracks widening into jagged ruins. Kyle was unraveling, but still too proud to say it aloud. He thought shouting at his assistant would stop the bleeding. He thought tightening budgets and doubling down on old-school deals would bring his clients back. But his world was built on arrogance. And arrogance doesn't adapt. Benton, under my quiet leadership, was evolving, fast. I invested in green logistics. Partnered with a minority women-owned freight network in the Midwest. Streamlined overseas supply chains. Our numbers surged. Word spread. And in a boardroom filled with people who once dismissed me as a retired widow, my name was now whispered with admiration. and fear. I kept my role unofficial in the public eye, still just the silent majority owner behind the curtains. That's the beauty of being underestimated. You move without warning. Strike without being seen. Dora updated me daily: client expansions, staff promotions, PR wins. She was brilliant and bold, and I let her lead loudly while I led surgically. But I couldn't hide my pride forever. Not when Rachel started smiling again. She was stronger now, able to stand and walk without help. We'd take small strolls around the block, arms linked. She wore a soft gray hat over her thinning hair, but her laughter was returning. One evening, we sat on the porch while the sun dipped below the tree line. The sky was streaked in orange and gold. Rachel rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You saved me." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. We both knew what she meant. I had saved her, but not just from her illness. I'd saved her from the shadow of a man who wanted control more than connection. A man who preferred silence to support. And now that man was stumbling hard. Kyle's business lost another major client, an international cosmetics brand that quietly transitioned to Benton. His COO resigned without warning. Rumors flew. I heard him yelling on the phone late into the night, pacing around the backyard like a storm cloud. He slammed his laptop shut during dinner and snapped at the server who brought our takeout. Rachel didn't even flinch anymore. She just reached for her water and looked out the window. But I noticed something else. Kyle had started watching me more closely. Little side glances. Long pauses when I spoke. He was starting to suspect. One morning, as I finished my oatmeal and he scrolled his phone, he asked too casually, "Did you ever work in logistics?" I didn't look up. Decades ago. You ever hear of Benton Strategies? I sipped my tea. Sounds vaguely familiar. He narrowed his eyes. They're screwing me. Oh. They've taken every major client in my pipeline. Every time I think I've got a deal, they outbid me or slide in last minute. Someone's funding them heavy. It's not normal growth. I shrugged. Maybe they just have better leadership. He clenched his jaw. I know someone's behind this. It's too targeted. I stood, carried my dish to the sink, and wiped my hands dry. Funny how business feels personal when you're not on top anymore. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Good. Let him. I knew the collapse was coming. But I needed it to happen publicly. Loudly. So I waited. And Benton delivered. We launched a massive campaign, one that highlighted Benton's commitment to diversity, sustainability, and ethical sourcing. The video featured stories from our warehouse workers, engineers, partners, all talking about how Benton had changed their lives. At the end, Dora appeared, stating proudly, "Our mission is bigger than numbers. We serve people. And we're owned by a woman who's been underestimated her whole life, and never needed to shout to lead." No name. No photo. But anyone paying attention could guess. That video went viral in our industry. Kyle saw it. I watched him watch it. He didn't say a word. But that night, he poured himself another drink. 3 days later, his biggest client terminated. A letter. Cold. Direct. Just business. He screamed in the garage, shattering a mug against the concrete. Rachel and I stayed inside. She held my hand and whispered, "You did this, didn't you?" I looked at her, steady. "He took your voice for years. I'm just giving you the space to reclaim it." She nodded. Her eyes glistened. "I don't want to go back to being that quiet. Ever again." "You won't," I promised. And she didn't. But I wasn't done yet. I had one final move, and it needed to be surgical. Kyle's last chance at survival was a merger, a desperate attempt to align with a small but stable distribution firm in Nevada. They were considering it, barely. But I knew the CEO. An old friend. I made a call. One call. And the merger died before it started. Kyle came home hollow-eyed. "They pulled out," he muttered, dropping onto the couch. "Said the optics weren't right." I leaned against the doorway. "Maybe they've heard stories. About how you treat people." He stared at me, jaw tight. "Why do I feel like you know more than you're letting on?" I walked over. Sat down beside him. looked him in the eyes. And for the first time, I let him see it. The day you told me I was too fragile, I said slowly, was the day you gave me the reason to rise. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. You underestimated me, Kyle. Just like you underestimated Rachel. And now the business you worshipped belongs to the woman you ignored. He blinked. You? I own Benton. I've owned it for months. He recoiled like I'd slapped him. I rebuilt what you crushed. And I didn't need a title. I didn't need applause. I just needed you to keep underestimating me. He looked like he might be sick. I stood. You don't get to control this house, or this family, or this story anymore. And I left him there. Silent. Defeated. Cracked open by the truth he never saw coming. He didn't come out of his room for nearly a day. Kyle, the man who never skipped a morning meeting, slept through too. His car didn't leave the driveway. The blinds stayed closed. And in that silence, something changed in this house. It wasn't louder. It wasn't chaotic. It was lighter. Rachel moved more freely. Played music again in the mornings, soft jazz floating through the halls while she watered her plants. I caught her laughing on the phone with her sister, a woman she hadn't spoken to in months. The tension that used to cloud her face began to soften. As for me, I wasn't hiding anymore. I started taking Zoom calls from the dining room, wide open. Investment meetings, client briefings, expansion talks. Benton was growing, and I wasn't going to shrink to make Kyle comfortable anymore. He finally emerged around dinner time, unshaven, wearing an old t-shirt I didn't recognize. He didn't say much. Just sat down, reached for the salt, then paused mid-reach. You're not really going to keep running it, are you? I looked up from my plate. Running what? He narrowed his eyes. Benton. You've made your point. You got your little win. Why not sell it now and be done with it? I smiled politely. Because I'm not done. And it's not a little win. It's a legacy. His fork clattered to his plate. Rachel, you're just going to let her do this, he snapped, turning to her. Rachel didn't flinch. She wiped her mouth gently and said, she's not asking your permission. Kyle's mouth dropped. And I almost laughed. Almost. He started spiraling faster after that. I knew the signs, the frantic calls in the garage, the desperate LinkedIn updates, the emails he accidentally left open on the living room laptop. He was applying for advisor roles, consulting gigs, anything to claw back relevance. But no one was biting. Why would they? His reputation was tarnished. Not by me, by his own arrogance. His clients had moved on, his competitors outpaced him, and the industry whispered about how his mother-in-law took over while he was napping on the throne. He was becoming a ghost in a room he used to command. And ghosts only grow louder when they're ignored. One night, he confronted me. It wasn't dramatic. It was pitiful. I was closing my laptop, wrapping up a final call with a warehouse expansion team in Ohio. The numbers were good. I felt proud. He stood at the doorway like a kid waiting to be scolded. You embarrassed me, he said quietly. I looked up. No. You embarrassed yourself. He stepped forward, voice trembling. I built that company from the ground up. I tilted my head. You inherited it from your father. Ran it into the ground. You built a throne out of other people's backs, and when they stepped away, you collapsed. His face flushed. You're not better than me. I never said I was. You just assumed I couldn't be. That's when his hands curled into fists. He didn't hit me, of course not. But he wanted to. I could see it in the tightness of his jaw, the fire behind his eyes. You think this is over? He hissed. You think Benton will survive you? The industry is cutthroat. One mistake, one error, and it's gone. Then I won't make one, I replied calmly. And I didn't. If anything, the next month was our most successful yet. We launched a new eco-packaging division. Won an innovation award from a national business journal. Dora was featured in an article titled The Silent Queen Behind the Empire, and while my name wasn't in it, the profile painted a clear picture. A grandmother. A strategist. A woman who rebuilt power without noise. The media started circling. I ignored most of them. Let Dora take the spotlight, she deserved it. But one podcast reached out that intrigued me. Hosted by two sharp young women in their 30s, focusing on powerful older women in business. I agreed. The interview was electric. They asked good questions. Not just about logistics, but about ageism, sexism, legacy. Did anyone ever tell you that you couldn't lead? One host asked. I smiled. More times than I can count. What kept you going? I paused. My daughter's strength. My granddaughter's future. And my son-in-law's doubt. They laughed, and so did I. But it wasn't petty laughter. It was earned. Kyle listened to the episode. I know he did. He didn't mention it. Didn't have to. I saw it in the way he stopped making noise in the house altogether. No doors slamming. No pacing. Just silence. He'd finally realized he lost. Not just his clients. Not just his company. He lost the control he thought was eternal. And I was about to make it permanent. Rachel and I had been talking for weeks about downsizing. The house was large, too large now that the kids were gone, and Kyle had become more of a shadow than a presence. So we made a plan. Quietly. I bought a beautiful 3-bedroom townhome closer to the city, with a bright kitchen and a sunroom for Rachel's plants. It was near a library I loved, and only 10 minutes from Benton's new HQ. We packed fast. And one morning, while Kyle was out networking, we moved out. Everything. Even the spices. We left a single envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside? A legal document. Rachel's name was no longer attached to the mortgage. She wasn't liable. The house was his now, and so were the bills, the repairs, the empty rooms. We drove off in a rented truck. And I didn't look back. The new home is warm. Filled with music, laughter, and quiet power. Rachel is thriving. She's thinking of enrolling in art classes. Her smile is brighter now. The lines in her face more relaxed. I run Benton full-time now. Quietly. Strategically. I don't need a crown. Just results. Last week, Kyle called. I ignored it. Then he texted. You win. Is that what you wanted? I replied. No. I wanted you to see that I was never fragile. You just couldn't imagine strength looking like me. He hasn't messaged since. I hope he sits with that. I don't need revenge headlines. I don't need to shout. Because I already took everything he thought made him powerful, and turned it into something lasting, something human, something worthy. He said I was too fragile to handle the business. But he was too weak to handle me. And now? I'm just getting started. I thought I'd feel more triumphant after we left. After we packed up every last spoon, turned off the lights, and drove away from that cold, silent house where Kyle used to loom like a shadow across every room, I thought I'd feel like I'd finally won. But instead what I felt was quiet. Not empty. Just quiet. Like when a storm finally passes and the air hangs heavy and still. That's when you start cleaning up the debris. When you finally breathe. And when you realize, surviving wasn't the victory. Building something better afterward, that's the real win. Our new place is nothing flashy. 3 bedrooms, white shutters, a wraparound porch with soft wooden steps and a sturdy swing. The kind of home that feels like it holds stories, even before they happen. It smells like fresh paint, but Rachel already filled it with color. Her paintings on the walls, basil in the windowsill, jazz on the record player. I still wear my teal cardigan most days. A small part of me finds comfort in consistency. But everything else? It's new. Including the office Benton bought across town. That was the first move I made after we left Kyle. I didn't tell anyone, not even Dora, until it was signed. It's not a huge building. 2 floors, glass panels, clean lines. But it's ours. No inherited space. No leftover memories. Just a blank canvas for the company we were shaping with our own hands. Dora walked in the day after the keys were turned over and just stared. Is this for real? She whispered. I nodded. Welcome to the new Benton. She cried. And for once, I did too. We held our first all-team meeting on the 2nd floor. Everyone gathered in a wide sunlit room filled with folding chairs and pastries I baked that morning, Yes, I still make cinnamon rolls when I'm nervous. I stood in front of them, hands trembling just a little, and said, "You've all built something remarkable. But I want to say thank you, not for the profits, but for proving that leadership doesn't have to be loud. It just has to listen." They applauded. Then Dora stepped forward with a gift. A gold-foiled sign. It read, "Too fragile? Or just too brilliant to break?" We mounted it over the front door. Meanwhile, Kyle was spiraling. I only knew this because of whispers in the industry. A former client of his reached out asking for a meeting. When I arrived, he looked apologetic. "He called me 3 times last week," the man said. "Begged me to reconsider working with him. I told him I was already with you." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "He said you'd run Benton into the ground. That you didn't know the market. That..." I held up a hand. "Did he mention anything about fragility?" The client laughed. "Word for word." I nodded. "Then he hasn't changed." But I had. And I wasn't done yet. Benton was growing. Too fast for the supply chain we had. So I did something bold. I reached out to Kyle's former supplier. They'd cut ties with him months ago over unpaid invoices and inconsistent orders. But when they saw my name, they booked a meeting immediately. We sat in a coffee shop downtown, clean, modern, filled with the scent of roasted beans and quiet ambition. I laid out my vision. More transparency. Weekly audits. A long-term contract with room to grow together. The rep leaned back and smiled. "You're offering what Kyle never did, respect." I just sipped my tea and replied, "I'm offering what he was too proud to imagine." We signed the deal that afternoon. Rachel was thriving too. No longer dodging tension. No longer walking on eggshells. She started painting again. Took a part-time position at the local gallery. Even started mentoring young artists. One night, as we sipped wine on the porch, she said softly, "Do you think he'll ever change?" I didn't need to ask who. I just looked out at the sunset and replied, "Only if losing everything finally makes him look inward instead of blaming outward." She nodded. We both knew the truth. People like Kyle don't change. They just get quieter when they realize no one's listening anymore. Then came the gala. A city-wide business event. Black tie. Cameras. Journalists. Invitations only. Benton had been nominated for Most Resilient Company of the Year. I didn't expect to win. But Dora convinced me to go. I wore a navy blue gown. Rachel helped curl my hair. Even bought me a soft silver scarf to drape over my shoulders. I looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked like someone who knew who she was. The ballroom was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers, jazz quartet, champagne flowing like waterfalls. And halfway through dinner, I saw him. Kyle. Alone. He was sitting at the very back, sipping something dark and brooding. He looked smaller. Grayer. Like someone who hadn't realized yet that the world had moved on without him. Our eyes met for just a moment. Then I turned away. We won. When the announcer said Benton, Dora let out a shriek and hugged me so hard my glasses slid off. I walked up to the stage to polite applause, took the mic, and said, "This award isn't about resilience. Not really. It's about reinvention. It's about what happens when people stop underestimating you, and more importantly, when you stop underestimating yourself." Silence. Then thunderous applause. Somewhere in the back, I knew Kyle was still watching. But this time, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. After the gala, a young woman approached me outside the hotel. She looked barely 30, eyes wide, notebook in hand. "Sorry to bother you," she said. I wanted to say your speech hit me hard." I smiled. "Thank you. My last boss said I wasn't tough enough for business. That I should focus on admin work." I tilted my head. "And what are you doing now?" She smiled. "I just launched my own startup." I grinned. "Good. Don't let anyone call you fragile. You're not glass. You're steel wrapped in velvet." She laughed. "I'm writing that down." I walked away feeling full. Not just victorious, but useful. And at this age, That's everything. Kyle sent one last message that week. A voice memo. Just 8 seconds long. You really think you won, don't you? I didn't reply. Because I didn't think I won. I knew it. And I didn't need his permission to claim it. Now, every time I walk into Benton's office, the sun pouring through those tall glass windows, the buzz of creation in the air, the gold-lettered sign above the front door, I feel the truth humming through my chest. I am not fragile. I am a storm in silk. And he? He underestimated the wrong woman. It's funny what people remember. Some remember birthdays, wedding anniversaries, promotions. I remember the exact sound of Kyle's voice when he said I was too fragile. Not the words, the tone. That smug tilt. That downward glance. Like I was some relic from another era, and he was indulging me by letting me stand beside him. He doesn't speak to me anymore, of course. But his words, they still echo sometimes. Only now? They fuel me. I didn't set out to become a symbol. But that's what started happening. After the gala, word spread. Local businesswomen started reaching out. Young ones, older ones, single moms, recent retirees. They asked me to speak at luncheons, workshops, even on podcasts. At first I declined. Public speaking always made my knees shake. But Rachel said, you don't have to be polished. You just have to be real. So I tried. I told my story honestly. From the first condescending smirk Kyle gave me to the moment I walked out of that gala holding a trophy that didn't just belong to me, but to every woman who'd ever been told to stay in her lane. And suddenly, the invitations kept coming. Benton was thriving. We weren't the biggest, but we were respected, profitable. And people said we had integrity, which mattered more to me than any bottom line. Dora handled most of the day-to-day now. I trusted her fully. Rachel's art career took off too. Her first solo show drew a packed crowd. I stood in the corner of the gallery, hands folded, watching strangers stare at her paintings with the same awe I used to feel when she drew on the back of grocery lists. You proud? She whispered. I always have been, I said. But the truth was, I was also proud of me. That felt new. And overdue. One Tuesday afternoon, I was finishing some paperwork at the office when I got a call from a former investor of Kyle's. A man I hadn't spoken to in years. He sounded sheepish. I hate to ask, he began, but I was wondering if you'd consider buying out what's left of Kyle's business. I blinked. Excuse me? He's hemorrhaging clients. Can't keep staff. And frankly, with your network, you could pick it up for pennies. Restructure it. Or absorb it into Benton. I leaned back in my chair, silent for a long moment. Then I said, tell Kyle I'll buy him out, but only under one condition. What's that? I want the building. The building. The one with his name on the side. The man chuckled. You're cold, Margaret. No, I said. I'm calm. There's a difference. 3 weeks later, I owned the building. Kyle didn't even show up to the closing. He sent a lawyer. A young man with shifty eyes and too much gel in his hair. When he slid the deed across the table, I picked up my pen, signed, and slid a small printed label out of my purse. Can you deliver this to the building manager? He raised an eyebrow. What is it? I smiled. The new nameplate for the sign outside. It read, Margaret and Company, built from the ground he took for granted. I didn't keep the business. Too toxic. Too broken. But the building? I turned it into a mentorship hub. Free workshops. Business coaching. Quiet co-working space. A resource library. A room full of coffee and courage. We called it The Lift. Rachel designed the logo. And every Thursday morning, I teach a class there titled, Not Fragile, Just Unleashed. We fill the room every week. I don't preach. I don't gloat. I just tell the truth. Sometimes I still run into people who knew Kyle. They ask if I ever think about him. I do. Not often. But sometimes. He hasn't recovered. Not because I destroyed him, but because he refused to evolve. He couldn't imagine a world where a 75-year-old woman in orthopedic shoes and a teal cardigan could outthink, outwork, and outlast him. But I could. Because I didn't build my power by dominating others. I built it by refusing to be erased. My favorite moment came the day a young woman, barely 22, walked into the lift and said, "I left a job last month because they said I was too emotional to lead. I wanted to say thank you. You made me believe I could start over." She held my hand. Her palm was shaking. "I'm scared," she whispered. I squeezed it. "So was I replied. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the thing anyway." She smiled. And I knew that was the real revenge. Not humiliating Kyle. Not winning awards. But showing the next girl in line that she's not alone. I still keep the teal cardigan. Not because I need it, but because it reminds me who I was when this all began. The quiet woman in the corner. The underestimated one. The one who didn't shout, but outlasted. I wear it sometimes when I walk through the Benton office or teach at the lift. People recognize me now. Not because of my last name, but because of what I refuse to let them take. You know, I used to think fragility was a weakness. But now I know better. Glass shatters. Porcelain cracks. But flexibility? Adaptability? That's not fragile. That's power. And the next time someone tries to say otherwise, I'll do what I always do. Smile. And keep building. Because the best revenge is leaving them behind. And never needing to look back.